Not here? Was she here last week?
Yes, she was in here last week.
Neither of us was.
Okay, good afternoon. Ebony Bull Gibson? Not here either? He's not here? He's not here. Jeffrey Bullard? Desmond Bullard? Can't see sir. Yeah, two. Oh, I have Gregory Bullard twice, I wonder why. Tamika Bullard? Tamika? Was she here last week? Yeah. Ashley Burrows? Jessica? Christine Curry? Charla Parkinson? Indira Ferguson?
Here.
Angelia? Am I pronouncing this right?
Yeah, Angelia, she's not here yet.
Was she here last week?
Yes.
Alexandria?
She's not here yet.
Sherelle Gordon?
Yeah.
Lynette Brack? Yeah, Brack. Great. Therese, Kim? Lahima Nicole? Aniska Meadows? Aniska Meadows? Carissa Miller?
Here.
Elkin Missy?
Honestly. No. Okay.
Anishka was here Tuesday too?
Who's
Anishka Meadows?
Yeah.
Was not here Tuesday? Alexandria, Gabrielle, she was here last week Tuesday? Gabrielle.
Alexandria was there.
I'm just checking these items.
Jumping Alexandria, Gabriel.
Oh, she
No, I don't.
Pardon me? Alexandria Gabrielle, she was not here last week.
This week, Tuesday, no.
She was not here Tuesday?
No.
Angelia was here last Tuesday?
Yes.
Durward Moss? Ashley Nebo? Amara Noddick? She was not here Tuesday, right? Felicia Pratt?
Present.
Shavonia? Pratt Brennan? Genovia? Stacey Russell?
Here. That's me.
You told me you had.
Yeah, that's why all I heard was stay sharp, but that's what you said, so I didn't hear the Anna part.
Renee Russell? Chris Saunders? Lisa Smith? Lisa Smith? She was not here last week also. I think you went a week for summer school. Alex is here, right? Yeah, you, right? You were over there last time. Gia, you there? Williams, you there? Tina Williams?
Right here.
Tina Williams Cole?
Hi.
Here. Doris Minter?
Here.
Chris Tia or Krista? Especially or you? Okay, did anyone here whose name I did not call up?
Right here.
Yeah.
Really? Quite a few? That means you're not on the register?
I'll run this one for you.
Okay, I sent you an email yesterday on the yes. I sent you an email yesterday on the course online. Okay. Okay, that's a problem. Just write your email also, okay? got all you got an email yesterday?
I got it.
I added one student I can understand their writing. Tamika Bolaveshi. And Derwin Moss, let's see. Yeah. You told me derwin.moss@live.com, right? That bounced back. Pardon me?
Just send it to work.
You did not work email? Can you write on the sheet they were going around? Please, I'm going to use that correct. How come you signed in last week? What's your name? Tell me, Ryan. Tell me when you signed in. What happened? There were several. There were several registers going around last week. Remember this one I passed around? You're not on here this morning. Okay. You're not registered with the institute according to the state they gave you. You may be, but not according to what they give me. Who else last week? Who else got on the sheet? You were here on, you weren't here Tuesday, right? What's your name? Okay, I need you guys to sign on the sheet going around, okay? What's your name?
Kendra King.
Pardon me?
King. Kendra King.
No, you're not on the excuse list. What's your name? What's your
Yes, sir. Ricardo.
Ricardo Smith, you said? Neither you. Pardon me? Cindy Rose. Anyone else? Sorry. You just signed back, that's why. Yeah. Not one. I learned at the end of class. I had to turn it into the office. I couldn't do that.
Is that a copy?
Pardon me? No, that's why I made my own tonight. On the Excel good, I can say.
Anybody else sign?
Over here.
One or two sheets.
Everyone sign this one?
He said on two sheets.
Send the next one round.
You get up to second. No, next one.
He sent around two sheets.
Okay, so if you want the 5 students whose names are on the register, I would have been able to send you an email. Like Sonia, King, Rose, Ryan, and who else? So are we stayed at 9 tonight? Because 6:20 and we haven't got started yet.
I guess.
See why we just listen, students. At the end of the day, I always tell students, you're here to learn. We can leave at 8 o'clock, we can leave at 7:30. At the end of the day, it's the knowledge you take from this program that's important. We starting at 6:30 for 6 o'clock class. That means that time is going. First of all, the register needs to be correct, right? I'm spending the time to correct it. That's what's wrong. There's several students I would not have been giving you attendance credit. Okay? Because I need to have it correct. If you want me to just rush through it, I can do that. I love being on my bed. I love being on my bed. I left home at 4 o'clock this morning. I was at the gym at 4 o'clock. You finished? second one like this. This is a large class. Very large. Who just came in? Bullet, right? What's the name? How am I help you out? It's here. Tamika Bullet. How do you spell Tamika? .bullet@rbc.com. That email bouncing back. Let me see. Your work email or your Hotmail? Let me check because I printed it to be sure. Not to make you sorry, it's Durrett. And someone else email bounced back. Sure, Tamika. You got my email? Alright. No one else came in, right? So I can put this away. Okay, now talking about the email I sent you today. Correct? Okay. The email I sent you today. I sent you an email of the essay topics we're going to cover. I'm not sure yet whether I'm going to assign them or we're going to discuss them in class. But at the end of the day, the exam I give you, and the final, the midterms, are going to come from that paper. Okay? So you now know the essays I'm going to quiz you on. You don't have to wonder what essays are coming. It's going to be one of those 10 essays. Okay? What I normally do with students, which I don't know if I'm going to do with this class, is that throughout the semester I assign those essays to you. You write them, I grade them, I give them back to you. Okay? But all the whining in this class, I'm going to do that already. Okay? Just so much whining. At the end of the day, again, because I don't do it, you're compromising your grades. Okay? You don't know how I'm grading. You don't know what information I put in the essays, etc. The reason I assign them, I spend a couple hours reading them and grading them, recording a grade, is I want you to do well on the exams. So that's why I give you the homework, okay? But I'm not sure I want to do it because I can't take another student that I had last semester. Too much, okay? I have the quiz here made up for you. I'm going to discuss this with you at the end of class, so that when you come next week, you come prepared to write the quiz, okay? Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to have the same quiz in different versions. We'll be sitting together. For example, your question number 1 may be your question number 10. Because I want to make sure there's no copy in. Okay? So I'm going to have several. Listen, I had a student at COB. She brought her iTouch to class, and she had the essays on the iTouch. I wrote a letter today and she got expelled. She was copying it in the exam, the final exam. Another student I took 8 pages of notes from him in the final exam also. I wrote another day and they got expelled. So that's a word for wise, okay? Anyone found cheating, I'm going to report it. Okay? They had 8 pages of notes I took from the student who works to a bank. Okay? I won't say the bank. I won't say. Listen, the final, I already gave you the essays on the final exam, right? I gave the essays on the midterm. I gave the essays on the second exam. If you fail, it's up to you. You know that I'm going to ask you one of the essays, okay?
Yeah.
All right. And obviously, pardon me? If there's 10 on the page, it has to be 1 out of 10, right?
Duh.
Jasmine?
You can't make it. You ready.
Okay.
Okay.
Last class, I say last week. We just, Gia, am I checking you okay? You got my emails today?
Yes, I got it, thank you.
Okay, good. Last class, we started to go over the history of international banking. I told you in the last class that the origin of banking goes back to what? The Code of Hammurabi, right? I also told you that, I'm just going from my head, I don't have any notes in front of me. This class is not made lecture friendly. I also told you that the first international bank in the U.S. was established where? What year? 1914. That tells you that the U.S. is behind Canada, right? You know for a fact, I don't know when the first Canadian bank was established, but I do know that the Royal Bank started in 1908. Okay? So, I spent a lot of time discussing the Great Depression, the 1920s era, right? I spoke about the Industrial Revolution. With the Industrial Revolution, we saw the introduction of machinery and technology in the workplace. Workers relied on more strength of numbers, and as a result, they then became more efficient. We saw the banking system take off. When we moved to the 1920s, we saw the Great Depression. We saw a collapse, particularly in 1929, of the U.S. banking system, and we had the Great Depression. Then came regulation. The first major regulation was 1933, the Glass-Steagall Act. And the Glass-Steagall Act prevented banks from participating in investment banking activities. It significantly restricted the activities of U.S. banks or national banks because most of the money lost during the collapse of the U.S. system in the Great Depression was because banks were speculating too much with pensioners and workers' money and as a result, investment banking activities. And we know the adage, the higher the risk, the higher the reward. They were investing and they lost all of it, most of it. And as a result, the Glass-Steagall Act came, and the Glass-Steagall Act severely limited the activities of U.S. banks in the United States, U.S. banks. So then we moved past the Glass-Steagall Act, we moved to the 1940s. 1940s, we had Bretton. This is an essay, you know, I'm going over to the class, you know. This is an essay in the paper. In the 1940s, we had the Bretton Woods Agreement in New Hampshire. There are three key deliverables on the Bretton Woods Agreement. One was the World Bank, one was GATT, and one was the IMF, right?
Yeah. Right.
But the Bretton Woods Agreement also set the gold standard, right? And it had the currencies fixed, not floating to the US dollar. And the initial value of the US dollar was set at how much dollars per ounce of gold? $35 per ounce of gold, right? So, me, I thought I was I have to buy that in the class, okay? This is on vibrating now. So that's the 1940s, right? This is just a snapshot. Then we move to the 1950s. What were the big events in the 1950s? Don't remember?
The Reconstruction.
Reconstruction, you look at the Marshall Plan. The Marshall Plan was in the 40s. What was the purpose of the Marshall Plan? Help build Europe because the World Bank was progressing too slow. And as a result, the Marshall Plan was introduced, and the Marshall Plan was introduced to expedite the reconstruction of Europe. Did you sign in, Tamika? No. You signed it? I mean, I don't know if the office actually goes for you, but they signed it, okay? So, and I think we stopped there. Then we spoke briefly about London, the major financial centers. I told you in Europe, there were, London was the primary financial center in Europe. I didn't tell you the other major financial center would be Germany, right? Excuse me? Switzerland. Then in Asia, I told you the major financial centers were Singapore, I said China. I never said China.
Yes.
I said China is not as the major three. Singapore, Hong Kong, and Japan. I never said Tokyo. Tokyo is a city, okay? China is what China ranks behind them. When you discuss the Chinese banking system, you're going to see how far behind the Chinese banking system is to Singapore, for example. Singapore rivals New York. Any of you been to Singapore before? Okay, rivals New York. If you're in Singapore, you think it's New York City, except that it's clean. Okay, and What else did we discuss? I haven't looked at my book yet, it's all in memory. Okay.
North America.
We discussed North America as a major financial center. And
South America.
South America, we discussed the Caribbean, thank you. An essay I gave on this paper is the major financial centers in Europe, discuss them, Europe, Asia, and the Caribbean. I didn't ask you about North America, Europe, Asia, and the Caribbean. Discuss these financial centers and how they contribute to the global economy, for example. So in the Caribbean, we have four really. The Bahamas, Cayman, Barbados. Correct?
Yes.
Okay. Pardon me?
3 days and a sleep.
Okay, I'm being studied. Okay, and the Barbados dollar is worth 50 cents to the US dollar, right? You go right? Where it's worth, if I give you a US dollar, Barbados will give me 2 Barbados dollars. Correct? So in Bermuda, the dollar is worth $1 US dollar. And in Cayman dollar is worth more than the US dollar. Cayman dollar is worth approximately 120. If I give you a Cayman dollar, you give me 120 US dollars. Okay? And I also introduced to you in Europe, primarily London, Germany, and Switzerland. Okay, then I briefly discussed this code here, the sheet I gave you. I told you you're required to know until further notice 1 to 40, I said, right? So in agreement, thank you. That's why I told you to put it in color. Pardon me? So I'm not sure I'm going to put it on the quiz here. I'm not sure yet. Okay? But for example, if I was to ask you, Argentina, what's the name of the currency? What is it? And what is the code? Good. Okay. So, and I told you it's a self-study. Okay? Yes. I didn't give you one? And I'll I can't walk too much tonight. My shoe heel separate us walking now. Embarrassing. Very embarrassing. I'm about to take these shoes off. Very embarrassing. This is the email I sent to you. This one on the brown arrows. I do my own type in class, okay? This is your midterm, your final, everything on this paper. Right here, just hand it up to you, okay? And that's flip code sheet, and these model which questions you want to do. That's the exams. So let's get started then. So normally what I do at the beginning, sorry, I don't want to make this up. Just speaking of the sheet, I pass it back. Just pass out this one. Sorry, don't let me see that. Ricardo, you got an email with the copy of this book?
You'll get it.
Everything I've said to you pretty much came from this book so far. Okay?
You'll get it. Did you remember chapter 11?
Yeah, that's not important right now.
Okay.
So money, I hope I get to chapter 11, okay?
All right.
So,
This was fun, right?
I can give you the book, you can copy it. I like it. I'm ending out of town tomorrow.
I copied for myself and nobody else.
Okay. One of the things I didn't tell you in the summary was that foreign banks operating in the United States. What I told you, that foreign banks had more latitude than U.S. banks. They were not subject to the same regulations, and as a result, you had an expansion of foreign banks in the United States, and U.S. banks really protested against it. They felt that within the United States, foreign banks had more advantages. One of the key advantages I told you was that foreign banks in the United States were not subject, in some states, to reserve requirements. Right?
I didn't hear that. Sorry.
What I told you was that foreign banks in the United States were not subject to reserve requirements nor to the federal deposit insurance coverage. So as a result, I told you also that in California, we had a significant amount of foreign banks not operating there because it was more favorable in New York on the East Coast, where they did not have these reserve requirements, but California was one of the states that insisted on it. Correct? Okay. So there's a question on your quiz about that. Why did foreign banks? You don't like quizzes, class?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, they help you.
As long as I'm prepared.
Okay? It's on page 12 of the book, okay? You're going to learn later on that, what's another name for the World Bank? The National Bank for Reconstruction and Development, IBRD. So, in an exam, I may deliberately not use the name World Bank, okay? Let me ask you about IBRD. And you have to know I mean the World Bank, okay? We also discussed page 13. This is very, any of you my age. Yeah, I don't think. All you young people. Pardon me? 53. On page 13. There are a couple of questions on this in the exam. It says that you're reporting me. The oil crisis, obviously a professional about me, I charge a fee for that. The oil crisis of 1973 had the single most important effect. You see what I'm reading from?
Yes.
Nicaragua?
Yes, yes, yes.
No tiene papel, el libro. The oil crisis of 1973 had the single most important effect on the international capital markets. Those of you who were around in the 70s like me, the oil crisis in the Bahamas was so significant that the price of gasoline almost doubled during this period. There was a shortage of gasoline in the Bahamas. The gas stations were like how if you have a hurricane today, how it's very difficult to get the gas stations. People were storing gas at home in drums and things. For weeks and weeks and weeks, you could only get gas if you use some other gas station. The interest rates in the United States, this is during the Jimmy Carter era as president, the interest rates in the United States had gone up to 18–19% because of shortage of oil. And you know why this is so important is because oil factors production. If oil goes up, the cost of production increases. Correct? So this crisis was so significant that it affected all the major markets. The cost of oil has skyrocketed. The supply was reduced. You know, there's an inverse relationship between price and supply in the economic process, right? When the supply is low, price goes up. When the supply is high, price comes down. Correct? All you did economics, right? Okay, good. So in the 1970s, and early 74, oil prices tripled, I said double. As a result, the oil-producing countries found themselves with massive increases in revenues and little capacity to absorb them. So they had so much money because the prices tripled, that's what it means. And they couldn't use all the money. That's how what's happening in the Middle East today. An enormous pool of capital assets, at the time $335 billion, appeared in financial markets around the world. Now this is 1973 money. You can imagine how important it is today if we was to do time value of money and calculate the value of that money today. Okay? Profited by these various forces, the U.S. lifted most of its regulations, currency regulations, and the dollar was then allowed after the oil crisis to float freely. Until then, the dollar was fixed. Okay? So the relationship is the oil crisis was the impetus that allowed the US dollar to float freely. Okay? Do you know what I meant by float freely? Its value is determined by by its demand and supply. Okay? Because the Bahamas dollar, no matter what, is fixed. The US dollar today is still fixed. Am I reading? So this step by the US marked the end of the managed flow system set with the IMF. So remember the IMF fixed the dollar, the gold standard, blah, blah, blah. So the oil crisis ended that fixation, okay? So the major regulatory change up to this period was the passage of the International Bank Holding Act of 1978. With the inability of the U.S. banks to compete effectively with many foreign counterparts, because I told you already, in the 50s and so on, U.S. banks had a disadvantage over foreign banks. So the International Bank Holding Act of 1978, that year is important to me, I won't forget, that's the year I came out of high school, to deal with the inability, this act provided for the creation of yet another type of banking entity, the IBS. So the IBS, International Banking Facilities, evolved when the International Bank Holding Act of 1978 was passed. And this allowed for these companies to provide domestic banking services to foreign nationals, subject to a number of restrictions. So foreign nationals in the US, after the International Bank Holding Act of 1978, could then operate financial accounts in the US banking system. Okay? Like how today, it's very difficult for foreign nationals. Who was the central bank? Who was here last week? He's not here tonight? It's very difficult, like you see the yellow shirt, it was very difficult for foreigners to come in the system today and open US accounts, payment dollar accounts. Right? Because IBFs were treated as offshore banks owned by bank holding companies, they were immune from certain federal regulations, even though they operated within the US. So IBFs had an advantage over the US banks because they were immune from all of the regulations that US banks have to face. Okay. So, we'll jump to page 16. The Basel Accord. All you have a Basel, right? In your other classes? There's a piece of cake then. You have an essay on Basel on that sheet also. Okay? So you studied Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 already? What do you study with Basel? What do you know? Basel, Basel, same thing. I said Basel, some say Basel. It's Basel. Okay. This is very important class. Basel Accord. I can guarantee you, you're going to be tested on this by me, okay?
Okay.
The Basel Accord, 1988, it's a turning point in international banking, and it's still very prevalent today. All of this nonsense is going on in the media of the Bank of Bahamas is because they and other banks are required to conform to Basel recommendations. When the central bank audits them, they audit their requirements, reserve requirements, to ensure conformance with the Basel standard. Okay? Basel, of course, is in Switzerland. That's where it comes from. Okay? The Basel Accord was to have safer banks competing with each other in a level playing field. That was the main deliverable or main purpose of Basel, to have banks operating safely and they could compete on a level playing field. All banks had to use the same standard of measurement or judgment, okay? No matter what country you're in, to determine your reserve and capital requirements, okay? The two main drivers behind the Accord were the perceived need to increase the falling level of capital in the world banking system relative to loans, and the need to pacify U.S. banks that they were losing ground to Japanese banks in international markets. I asked you a very germane question last week. I asked you how do banks shut the shoes annoying me now. How do banks make money? Yeah, that's nice. Sorry, class, I apologize. How do banks make money? I just need to walk in my car. How do banks make money? So Ryan, right? How do banks make money?
Like you said, loans, deposits, foreign exchange, investments.
You know, answer the question like you're a 300 level student. It's 300 level class, right?
That's non-interest income, investment income, and non-interest income.
And what do they do? Okay. The generics of a banking system is to make deposits, make loans, and accept deposits from customers, right? Primarily, banks make money by accepting deposits from customers and lending these deposits less reserve requirements to customers, right? When I say reserve requirements, they're not allowed to lend all of their deposits. They have to leave some in reserve. And with the Basel Accord, the Basel ensures standardization of a common measurement globally wherever a bank is operating of how do you measure reserve or capital adequacy requirements. Okay? So you can't have Royal Bank doing one thing in the Bahamas, Royal Bank in Cayman Islands or something else, Barclays doing one thing here, Barclays in the UK or whatever. That's the standard capital adequacy reserve requirement measurement throughout the banking world. We're going to discuss what it is in a minute. Okay? I also asked you, Mr. Ryan, a fundamental question. I asked you, what is that net interest income called, in other words, the net interest income? The difference between loan and deposit income? Spread. Okay, good. That's a common word you need to know. Okay? Spread. The net amount of the, hopefully it's positive, the difference between the income on loans and the cost of deposits, okay? If we had more time, I would explain to you why the spreads in the Bahamas are so unreal compared to other markets. For example, what do banks pay on deposits now? Less than 1%, right?
Yes.
And they charge 14% on loans. So that means that's unreal, okay? Well, consumer loans, generally, from 8 to 14% on average, right?
Yeah.
That's unreal. And the fees bank charge, okay? Only in the Caribbean markets is this allowed to happen. In more developed markets, is interest income or spreads are regulated, unmanaged because the fees banks charge in these markets, the spreads are too unreal. That's why you can have Commonwealth banks making $1 million a week in net income. Not interest income, net income. You look at their financial statements, they have $50+ million a year in profit. Okay? That's unreal, okay? It's like printing money. Relax, Desmond Stewart said. You work at Commonwealth Bank too, right? I have good friends working at Commonwealth Bank. So, with the Basel Accord,
Why is that allowed here?
because regulation.